evening, honorable members, our support staff, the members of the public on the platform, and those who will be making presentations to the committee. It's a continuation of the process of dealing with Eskom debt relief bill today. As you know, that the Constitution enjoins us to involve the public and stakeholders, people with interests on the bills that we pass. So as we deal with the Eskom debt relief bill, there are organizations which have approached us to say they would like to interact with the committee as we deal with this bill. Others made written presentations. I think Darren will share that. But today, allow me, honorable members, to welcome the Mineral Council of South Africa, Congress of South African Trade Unions, and Dear South Africa. Those are the three organizations which will be making presentations to the committee. You are all welcome, ladies and gentlemen, from these organizations. But before we proceed, Darren, can I get an indication of the apologies?
Chairperson, yes, we received an apology from Mr. Kwangwa.
Can you note that apology, please? Okay. Yes, as I've said, that we then go to agenda item number 3, where we'll allow the stakeholders to make their presentations. And then how we do it, we'll allow Minerals Council of South Africa, Congress of South African Trade Unions, and Dear South Africa to make presentations. As we indicated in your letters, you are having 20 minutes maximum to make your presentation. We'll wait for the 3 of you to make your presentations. After that, the members of the committee will engage with their presentations. They'll pose questions. As they pose questions, they'll be indicating that the particular question is directed to which stakeholder. So without wasting time, let me allow Minerals Council of South Africa to make their presentation to the committee. You are welcome. Please introduce yourself because I haven't had names as to who's leading the delegation. So Minerals Council of South Africa, after 20 minutes, then you bring the meeting back to me. Thank you very much. You are most welcome.
Thank you, Chair, Honorable Chair. My name is Bongan Motsa, and good morning to colleagues on the call. Let me just slide my presentation, and then I will close the video.
Oh, by the way, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Fiso Buthelezi, the chair of the committee.
We'll call you Honorable Chair. Thank you, Mr. Buthelezi. Let's see here. I'm sure you can see the presentation. I'll put it on slide. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Chair. We have 20 minutes, but I do not think that will exhaust all the 20 minutes. So this is our presentation after the submission that we made as the Minerals Council. I'll just go straight to. I don't think I have to talk about the Minerals Council, who we are. I feel that maybe that will waste time, but maybe just in a sentence, we represent mining companies, and the mining companies that we represent form about 80% of mining GDP in South Africa. So I'll then just go to the first slide. This slide sets the context of our submission. And here we are showing 3 countries. It's the US, China, and South Africa. This is the industrial sector, which essentially we just call it the manufacturing sector, energy consumption. We start with the US. In the US, because it has become so much of a services-driven economy, their manufacturing sector has been declining over the years. And if you compare that with China, China really is the global manufacturing factory. And we can see that by China consumes almost 3 times more energy as that of the industrial sector in the US. And this is not really about decoupling of energy consumption and manufacturing. It's really the fact that in the US has been deindustrializing. The same with South Africa. The watershed year for South Africa was 2011, where we see energy consumption really declining because one of energy not being available, and 2, because of double-digit annual tariff escalations. So and in all of this,
Mr. Mutsa, just hold a little bit. Can I request everybody to mute his or her gadget so that you can hear Mr. Mutsa? Please, we are definitely interfering with his presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you, honorable members. Thank you, everybody. Please continue, Mr. Mutsa.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. So this really, this chart sets the scene for us that as South Africa, the lack or inadequate energy supply or electricity supply has had adverse effects on the economy. So going to slide 2. Slide 2, we show, this is now more specific to mining in South Africa. If we look at the 3 top graphs, the red one, I'm sure with you as well, it also shows as red, the black and the green. Those are what we refer to as the cost indices. And if you look at them, they've been growing much more than the price indices. For example, leading the pack in the last 10 years from 2012 is the PPI for mining, producer price inflation for mining. It's been escalating much more than prices. And that is followed by Eskom average tariff adjustments, which has grown by more than double since 2012. In fact, since 2006, Eskom average tariff adjustments have risen by more than 900%. If we look at the green graph, that is CPI, CPI inflation in South Africa. That has grown by just by 1.5 or close to 1.6, effect of 1.6 compared to its level in 2012. So all of those 3, the top ones, relate to costs that the mining industry experiences. And then we now go to the price. The price indices. The price indices, we can see that base metals, precious metals have just really not been growing as much. In fact, the costs have been growing more than the price. And the problem here as mining is that we are price takers. Most of our product is sold in the international markets. And so any increases in price or in our inputs, we cannot transfer those to the final price of the product. So what then eventually has to happen is that we have to see where we cut costs. And most of the time, we've had to reduce the number of employees we have so that we can just remain competitive. This next graph, this next chart really shows the status quo, that essentially electricity available in South Africa has been declining over the years. And this chart really starts from 2015, February, right up to 2 months ago, which is February 2023. If you look at the trajectory of both the electricity produced and also the actual electricity distributed, you can see that the chart is downward. And this not just, I mean, it doesn't only affect mining, but it just affects the entire economy. So the question that we have to ask, what do we have to do with the energy supply industry in South Africa? And we make several recommendations, which we've made in written form in our submission. And here we just provide a summary of those recommendations. So we go to the next slide. So here we just talk about the general principles of the Eskom debt relief. And we're saying the key to relieving South Africa of inadequate electricity supply is essentially to sell the coal power plants to the private sector. You can also, in fact, you can also concession them to the private sector, but because the main shareholder, the only shareholder in Eskom, really has competing objectives in terms of the resources have to be used by government to provide health services, education, security, and other social services. At the end of the day, you find that government does not have the funds to fund Eskom. And that is why the primary proposal that we make is that the generation aspect of Eskom should be privatized. Those coal-fired power plants should be sold to the private sector. Recommendation number 2, we do accept and acknowledge that perhaps because of one reason or the other, it may not be possible for government to agree to privatize the generation, the coal-fired power plants, or sell them to the private sector. Then we're saying a suboptimal option then would be for those coal-powered fire plants to be operated by public-private partnership, which includes, of course, government and the private sector. And here, the reason for the private sector's, the role of the private sector would essentially to be providing the resources, the financial resources to recapitalize these power plants. Because our view is that really, it's a point that I've said already, is that government has a lot on its plate. And taking 270 billion rands to Eskom is just too much. It basically sacrifices other services that could be rendered by the state. Recommendation number 2, the issue here is the unbundling of Eskom. Our view is that again here, the private sector should play a role, not just in generation, as we have expressed in the previous slide, but also in transmission. We do accept that transmission is a natural monopoly. But again, if there's a natural monopoly, you can use the concessionaire model, where you appoint a company, private company, to run the transmission or operate or maintain the transmission infrastructure for 15 or 20 years, instead of government having to do that. Again, the issue here is that government, because of government competing objectives, and also what has been articulated in the media and the Zondo Commission relating to corruption, government resources, we feel that are being wasted by propping up Eskom. Eskom, especially the generation fleet, should be sold to the private sector. The transmission infrastructure should be concessioned to a private sector operator. And then some of the distribution, because Eskom owns some of the distribution assets, those ones as well could be wholly owned by the private sector, should be sold to the private sector. We do not want to even talk about the municipalities in this instance, because the municipalities do not have the resources, they do not have the capacity to maintain and operate the distribution assets in their portfolio. So it is important that these as well are basically bought by or sold to the private sector. The next issue relates to Eskom staff morale. And this really has been articulated very well by the new Minister of Electricity. when he said that in his visits, he's found that most of the, especially those that have those coal-fired power plants that have to be commissioned pretty soon, he found that the staff morale there is very, very low, and that compromises the sort of performance of those coal-fired power plants. Our view is that, as the Minerals Council, is that the just energy transition should be well managed, so that, you know, so that employees, especially in the context of what we're discussing, what we're talking about today, so that employees in those coal-fired power plants are motivated to do their work, and that will really improve the EAF as well. Then the issue of municipal debt. This is the last slide from our part. The issue of municipal debt, our view is that we are aware of the circular that was issued by the National Treasury regarding this issue. But really, our view is that writing off municipal debt owed to Eskom, writing off that debt owed by municipalities really presents a moral hazard. What do we mean by that? We mean that if a person takes a risk, I can just relate it. If a person takes a risk, knowing that the adverse consequences of that risk that they have taken will be borne by another party, they're likely to take even more risk in the future. And that's our fear, that if you write off municipal debt, in future, municipalities would accumulate even more debt and not transfer those funds to Eskom, because they know that government will come to their rescue. We do not have a proposal really as an alternative to the one that has been presented by the National Treasury, but we do think that other measures should be explored to ensure that municipalities service their debt. It's now just above 50 billion rands, that debt. There must be, municipalities must be accountable. To give them a free pass will really create a bad precedent. It is likely that in the next 10 years, in fact, even with the measures that have been proposed by the National Treasury, it is likely that in the next 10 years, the municipal debt to Eskom would basically amount into hundreds of billions, even with this debt write-off on the part of government. So those are our proposals and our recommendations, Chair. And we really thank you for giving us an opportunity to present our views and proposals. And we will sit and listen to other stakeholders and then be ready for the questions later on. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Mr. Motsa, thank you very much for the presentation. We'll go straight to COSATU to make their presentation. As we said, 20 minutes, and we have been very generous. You gave us some more minutes. So, COSATU, Comrade Matthew, please come in.
Okay, good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. Yeah, we can come in straight then, Chair. I'll just upload the presentation quickly. Just 1 second. Yeah, okay. Well, thanks very much, Chair and members. Yes, good morning. My name is Matthew Parks from COSATU. So thank you for giving us space just to share our views on the Eskom debt relief bill. It really is quite one of the key bills in terms of the challenges facing society at large right now, and especially workers. So I think, Chair, just at a holistic level, as COSATU, we do support and welcome the Eskom debt relief bill overall. We do support its passage by Parliament. We've long championed the need as COSATU for the fiscus to take over Eskom's debt levels, which we feel are unsustainable. And we've raised this as part of a package of measures to enable Eskom to be stabilized, to be rebuilt, and to play the role it needs to play in the economy. And I think, whilst we welcome the debt relief bill, we are concerned about some of its underpinnings. So we think the bill does correctly highlight the need for measures to tackle the ever-rising levels of debt owed to Eskom by municipalities. But there doesn't appear to be a comprehensive program action to arrest this existential threat to Eskom's survival. The bill also speaks to the Eskom tariffs, and it speaks to the 18.65% for this year and the 12.7% increase for next year Eskom debt tariff levels. But it's silent on the effect of this continuous double-digit tariff hikes have had since load shedding started in 2006, and we know the effect they've had on the economy. We're also quite concerned about some of the conditions attached to the Eskom debt relief bill as well. In particular, the prohibition on Eskom in investing in new generation capacity for the time being. So, Chair, our support for Eskom, a debt relief package for Eskom is premised upon the facts of the economy, that Eskom is our most important single economic asset, generates 95% of our electricity, and that is going to remain so for quite some time. It transmits and distributes 100%. So the entire economy, including all of our jobs, the ability of workers to earn a salary, to take care of the families, depends upon a functioning and a modernized Eskom. So simply Eskom is just too big to fail. Chair, I think we all know for a variety of reasons, Eskom has incurred debt it can't afford to pay. Some of this is due to rampant theft and corruption, like we've seen at Madupi and Kusile. Some are due to mismanagement, institutional neglect, but also a lack of investment. Others, I think, as we all know, are due to aging infrastructure. And of course, others are due to rising levels of debt owed to Eskom by municipalities, by businesses, communities, and even government entities as well. So, Chair, we had proposed as COSATU, almost 4 years ago, that Eskom take over at least half, government take over at least half of Eskom's debt burden. So we are quite pleased the governors, heeded this call. They put in place a plan to take over 2/3 of it at 254 billion rand. And Chair, our proposal for some sort of a comprehensive plan to stabilize and rebuild Eskom were, encapsulated in the Eskom Social Compact signed at NEDLAC in 2020 by government and by social partners. So we really welcome the overall thrust and the objectives of the bill. And then we think that the relief is going to provide to Eskom is badly needed relief. So we hope this, and we believe this relief will help Eskom, Chair, to stabilize, to shift its resources to focusing on maintenance investments. And of course, this is the fastest way we have to ending load shedding, to easing the burdens on the workers, on the families, businesses, and the economy, and also the fiscus as well. Chair, I think also as the economy, emerges from the devastating levels of load shedding, companies will be able to sell the products. Restaurants can open and sell meals, etc. Workers can earn a wage. The state can collect taxes, which are needed to pay the Eskom debt. So this will not be money lost. It will actually be a wise investment in the economy. And of course, an economy which is crippled by load shedding simply can't do any of these. A clothing factory can't do anything if it's having 8-10 hours of load shedding every single day. It's not physically possible for them. Chair, our concerns about some of the conditions set by Treasury in the Eskom debt relief focus on two areas. The first is the prohibition on Eskom investing in new generation capacity. For us, this makes no sense. One of the fundamental causes of load shedding is that Eskom's generation fleet is really, in most instances, nearing the end of its lifespan. And we appreciate it will take time for new generation to come onto the grid, and the immediate focus of Eskom must be on fixing existing infrastructure. But if we're to ensure the long-term sustainability of Eskom and to also prevent load shedding, which cripples the economy, if we're to prevent those from becoming a permanent feature of the economy, then we need to not only fix existing generation infrastructure, but also to invest in new generation capacity. So the condition will ensure that Eskom will in the long term, will continue to spend money on aging and expensive infrastructure in the long term. And we do need to find a smooth transition where Eskom does invest in existing infrastructure, but also begins to move towards building new, modernized, more efficient, and also less costly generation capacity. This is key for us to survive and also for the nation to be insulated from permanent load shedding. We're also concerned about the clauses in the Eskom debt relief bill package, which we think will try to attempt to undermine collective bargaining by conditions set attached to wage negotiations. And those are really best dealt with at the collective bargaining forum at Eskom. Chair, our proposals on the Eskom, on the debt conditions, is one that the prohibition on Eskom investing in new generation capacity should be removed from the Eskom debt relief conditions. And the second, that the clause seeking to preempt and undermine collective bargaining process at Eskom should also equally, be removed. Chair, the bill does speak on the issue of municipal debt, and it correctly highlights the need to tackle the growing levels of money owed to Eskom. Currently, it's about 57 billion rand, and it's continuously rising each year. Much of this debt comes from about 40, 41, 47 of the nation's most financially distressed municipalities. Some of these municipalities owe each about R1 billion to Eskom. So the bill speaks to the need for measures to address this, including moving towards a single prepaid electricity regime, which is correct. Yet it doesn't provide a plan for this. Neither have we seen such a plan from the Departments of Mineral Resources and Energy, or public enterprises, or from COGTA, or SALGO, or even the municipalities, or even from Eskom itself. So it's one thing to provide lip service, another thing to have a concrete plan, which says we'll all move towards prepaid electricity. Chair, Eskom loses on average each year about 20 billion rand, and if we can tackle that 57 billion rand owed to it by customers, that really is going to go a long way to ensure it remains a viable entity, and also to allow it to have the money to invest in the necessary maintenance and new generation capacity. So we think government really does need to put in place the necessary measures to address this fiscal hole, which is really threatening Eskom's survival. So a proposal on the municipal debt front share is one that all customers are moved to prepaid electricity. This will help to end the rising levels of debt owed to Eskom, and also ensure it has the continuous, daily cash flow necessary to be operational. And that's not just a question, Chair, of individual households, but companies, SOEs, government departments, etc. Because not just being a question of poor households not being able to afford to pay the debt, which is an issue which needs to be addressed on its own, but also you would have seen in Tshwane hotels, you would have seen in Johannesburg, even diplomatic consulates, etc. So really, we need to move towards everybody paying upfront for the electricity they want to consume. Government also needs to determine which debt is not recoverable, which is recoverable, and that which is recoverable should be pursued even legally. It does require, Chair, and this won't be overnight, but a new municipal funding model which needs to be developed. The current one we think is collapsing given the state of the finances at municipalities. And we can also now see this is having a huge spillover effect on the ability of municipalities to pay Eskom what it is owed. SALGO will tell us that, yes, they owe 57 billion rand to Eskom, but communities owe them about 280 billion rand. So it's clear that the two are interrelated. So our proposal, Chair, is one that law enforcement organs also be actively deployed to support Eskom to deal with electricity connections, the legal connections. Equally, that COGTA undertake interventions to ensure that all indigenous households are registered for and do receive the allocation of free electricity, and that the number of free kilowatts could also then be increased appropriately. We've seen, Chair, quite a few municipalities just simply quietly allow the free electricity per household to disappear. They often raise significant administrative burdens to households. They have to register every single year to receive it, etc., etc. So that original promise we had made as the ANC government at that time is continuously, falling away in many communities. On the issue of the debt, the Eskom tariffs, Chair. So the bill states that Treasury believes it is necessary for Eskom to receive the approved 18.65% this year and the 12.75% tariff hike next year. And sure, this can appease Eskom. It can look good on its, on its balance sheet, but it really is a huge blow to an already battered economy, to workers, to companies. It's one of the major causes of inflation. There are no workers who are receiving 18% or 12% increases in their salaries. And most companies cannot afford it. And this means the companies will struggle to pay workers, struggle to hire new workers and help reduce unemployment, etc. Chair, also we recall that since load shedding first became a national phenomena in 2006, 17 years ago, Eskom has been receiving these double-digit tariff hikes almost every single year. And we've always been told that this is a short-term pain to ensure that Eskom has cost-reflective tariffs and that these would end load shedding. And the fact that 17 years later, we're still having this discussion doesn't, give one hope in these kind of promises from Eskom. Instead, what we've witnessed is unprecedented levels of load shedding and possibly even rising further to 10 hours, 12 hours, etc. Eskom will make a cost-reflective argument, and we think, Chair, that on theory that sounds fine, but in reality it's the deflection of its failure to abide by the PFMA and to manage Eskom in a climate which is free of endemic corruption and wasteful expenditure. For an example, Chair, we speak of the 400 billion rand worth of debt. Medupi and Kusile went to collectively cost about 100 billion rand. That's exceeded 200 billion rand so far, and it's going to continue to rise, and yet they still struggle to provide electricity. So, Chair, a cost-reflective tariff, yes, sure, but it needs to be premised upon an Eskom that is properly run and not the poster boy for corruption and for malfeasance. So our proposal here, Chair, is simply for Treasury to work with Eskom to identify all the financial leakages, to really develop a plan to end them, and to report to the nation quarterly on progress made in this regard. And we do note in the conditions in the bill that there is some indication of quarterly reports, but we think it is to go further than that, and that Treasury should also be deeply involved in helping Eskom reduce its financial wastages and corruption, etc. But I think, Chair, also if Eskom is really to be stabilized, to be rebuilt, and to meet its objectives, then Eskom does need to be given all the support it requires. So this does need to include the active support of the law enforcement organs. Eskom itself obviously cannot arrest people, and also needs to look at addressing the regulatory blockages to bring on board new generation capacity. So proposals here, Chair, is to escalate the enforcement of the scrap metals export ban, which came into effect a year ago, and also to put in place the measures to regulate the informal traders. We should be looking at the deployment of specialized support from the police, the Hawks, the NPA, the state security, to help Eskom uproot corruption and criminality. We also need the NPA and the judiciary also to prioritize cases affecting Eskom. Chair, Parliament has passed two progressive laws, the Criminal Matters Amendment Act, which deals with cable theft sentencing, the Auditing Amendment Act, which empowers the state to hold offending officials personally liable. We really need to see that government actively uses these progressive laws and powers to help deal with this cancer of corruption, which is really crippling Eskom. So in conclusion, Chair, I think we want to say as COSATU welcome the positive aspects in the Eskom debt relief bill. We hope it's going to help provide Eskom the support it needs to ramp up investments in maintenance and load shedding. I think, Chair, we are concerned though about the debt relief conditions attached, especially the condition which prohibits Eskom from investing in new generation capacity. We do agree with the bill highlighting the need to tackle the rising levels of municipal debt, but we need to see a comprehensive plan which tackles this fiscal threat to Eskom's survival. We think the Treasury does need to work closer with Eskom to deal with its fiscal leakages, develop an accurate cost-reflective regime that does not budget for corruption and for wasteful expenditure and expect the public simply to subsidize this or for the fiscus to always bail it out. And of course, the law enforcement institutions also need to play their role in supporting Eskom to tackle the criminality and corruption which are crippling it. So I think that's our presentation, Chair, in a nutshell. And I hope we've stuck to the time frame. And thanks very much, Chairperson, for giving us space as COSATU. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Comrade Matthew, for the presentation. Can I then request Dear South Africa to come in with their presentation?
Thank you, Chair. Rob Hutchinson here from Dear South Africa. If I may just share my screen. Just give me 1 second here to dial it in. There we go. All right. Is that visible?
Yes, we can see it.
You can see the screen. Lovely. Thank you. All right, just a quick a part about Dear South Africa and what we are. Dear South Africa is a non-partisan public participation platform. It operates at a not-for-profit level. It means it offers a free service to the public, and it facilitates public participation at all levels by informing, facilitating, reporting, collating the data, providing matrix summaries to government, and providing feedback to government and to the public. We also assist other NGOs, other nonprofits, and anybody who really wants to further democracy by encouraging public participation in policy formation. We've completed over 250 campaigns in the last 5 years, with over 4 million individual submissions delivered to government. We have quite a substantial database of 1.2 million subscribers who are active participants, and it's nationwide participation, not only at national level, but also local, provincial, municipal, and we provide participation campaigns in all of that, even tariff assessments and municipal tariff increases. It's provided as a full digital online platform, which is quite busy. It has over 1 million page views a month, and we deliver about 6 million emails through that system every month, both to government and to participants, and a large social media network of over 250,000 social media followers. So that means we get quite accurate feedback from the public and can provide great information to government at all levels, and come up with accurate surveys and sentiment. On the Eskom debt relief bill, we ran a public participation campaign on the platform, where we provided all the information, all the documents or related info, links to media articles, and we posted policy-related questions related to the bill, and provided a comment facility for participants to have a say. These are examples of the pages that we provided. It's an easy-to-use service available on mobile and on desktop and laptop. Each public entry was individually delivered to the chairperson of the Standing Committee, and for the attention of Mr. Darren Arends, the committee's secretary. As I mentioned, the comments and campaigns that we run are unbiased and non-partisan, so we capture a broad opinion of society or from society, and present it in a non-partisan way, free from political bias or ideological bias. In this campaign, a total of 9,298 comments were received by the set closing date, and we have supplied that as a PDF to all members of the committee, and we can supply you with a Excel spreadsheet so you can go through it and sort it and search and so on, should you wish to do so. From the campaign data, we have identified participants from different areas. We collect quite a lot of data, but I'll just present the high level data that we have presented here. Most comments originated from Gauteng, followed by the Western Cape and KZN, but we had a participation from all around the country, from every province, and some from outside of South Africa, expats and so on. Also broke it down into who participated, what the employment status was, and it's presented there. And mostly retired people have had a say. That's generally the case in our public participation events. There are various reasons to why that, but it's good to see that we had a good participation from the business sector, self-employed sector, and the employed sector, as well as representation from unemployed. The outcome, we were asked 2 questions. The first question was, do you support the 2023 Eskom debt relief bill as it has been proposed? And it's a broad question, just designed to get instant feedback from the participants. A resounding no, I do not. 8,799, which it comes to 95.61%, said no. Not fully, which means they do support it or don't support it, however, with conditions, it was 289, and yes, who support it outright, as is 115. By employment status, we can see quite an interesting, or it's actually quite similar across the board, where we can see retired people are again the greatest participants, and especially in the no, I do not agree with the bill, and business owners also showing a great participation there across all 3 selections, and the employed also do too. By province, we can go into these details. However, you do have it in the summary report in greater detail, so you can break it down into any combination of events. And you can do this with the Excel file that we will supply upon request as well. Sort it and collect some interesting and cross-sectional data there too. The top reasons, we provided selections based on the sections in the bill. We also provided an other section should people want to make additional comments. And interestingly enough, the other section was the top reason people provided, or top selection. Delegations of authorizations, there 10.88% of people gave that as their top reason for either objecting, supporting, or not fully. And direct charges for requirements of Eskom was 40.43%, which is, if you go through the comments provided in the PDF, we provided all 9,000 or so comments there, which you can go through. You can see some really interesting comments from the people there. And some people shared no concern whatsoever related to the bill in its current form. Top reason by employment status. I'm not going to bore you with all the details here, but it is in the presentation where you can go through it all. And we've broken that down into retired, employed individual, self-employed, unemployed individual, business owner, nonprofit, student, and not provided, which shows up as blank. I encourage you to go through those in the Excel spreadsheet. You can get a good view of which sectors of the population are most concerned and about what reason and they are concerned. It goes through all of them there. However, it does represent a broad view of the data that has been collected, and therefore we've done a comment by comment analysis and a word cloud, which shows words most used. So first, I start off with an unfiltered and set a minimum word frequency of 450, which means that a word has to appear at least 450 times in the comments. We upload all the comments in to the software, and it produces this. Eskom is clearly related there, as it is an Eskom related campaign, but interestingly you can see corruption. The larger the word, the more frequent it appears. So it's just a visual representation of that, but the words that jump out at you instantly are Eskom, more corruption, government, accountable, money, and payers, which is related to taxpayer. Debt is also high on the list. However, you do have unwanted words, including pay and all and just and any words that are commonly used in any sentence. So I filter those out, adjust the word frequency to 250, and gives us a more accurate view of concerns from the public. It's clear money is a major concern. Corruption is high up on the list, second on the list, and relief, people obviously have a concern. When they mention people bailing the government out again. Government is top on the list. Municipalities feature. Municipalities are talking about a lot in the writing off of debt and the unpaid debt owed by municipalities, and electricity again jumps up higher there. There are also other words. I can't put them all on here due to space problems. However, taxpayer and private also do come up. As I go into it, we can show you more. It's a more visual representation of how many times those words did appear. Money is high on the list, appears 3,000 times in the individual comments. Corruption, extremely high on the list. Government, a close follower, and debt, and so on. Corrupt and corruption are pretty much the same thing there as represented in the comments. So we should look at those as one. So then we broke down the comments into the individual selections that were provided per selection option. Do you support it? Yes, I do. No, I don't, or not fully. And this is just a summary of the yes, I do comments. And it's interesting to note that the participants are mostly concerned over a failing national electricity producer and the consequences it has for the South African economy. Economy is one of the top words, along with money. It is top concern for South Africans. People don't want load shedding anymore, and they want solutions provided for load shedding. There's a concern over renewables, filling that gap as they are inconsistent, and the concern over as whether it will solve load shedding by being unable to provide a base load. And further concerns around the much needed maintenance that we are all aware of to eliminate breakdowns. Of the summary of the people who selected not fully, who either agree or disagree with conditions, most of the participants are in favor of the debt relief bill. However, they have major concerns around the elimination of corruption, mismanagement, the recovery of stolen funds, transparency, accountability, and addressing the culture of non-payment, which is causing the municipal debt. Then of the no, I do not, the largest section. This is rather interesting, as there's such a broad variety through the comments. Some realize that there is a need for Eskom to be bailed out, as it is an essential state entity. The country cannot survive without electricity. The economy will crash. But they did raise concerns over, again, corruption, mismanagement, continuous bailouts, a lack of convictions and accountability, holding the perpetrators to account, and of course political interference. They do, however, provide solutions, which is great, which is what you want from public participation, and the solutions include a strong call for privatization, a reduction of the number of Eskom employees, and the employment of skilled individuals, and of course municipal debt does feature quite strongly throughout. So if I can show a few examples of comments, and I won't go too much detail as it is in the notes that have been provided to you, but please, I encourage you to go through it to get the fuller picture. But I picked a few that represent the overall sentiment of each reason and of each question. And I think this one from Poppy and the other one from Nolandi express exactly why they have selected yes, I do support the bill for other reasons. Nolandi expresses a concern about monitoring the use of these funds, as well as the tenders awarded, to prevent any irregularities. However, she agrees with the debt relief bill. Poppy she says if Eskom doesn't get financial aid, there's no way of solving the problems South Africa is experiencing. She is unemployed, disabled, and lives alone. She cannot afford anything unless she receives a handout, which I think is a good representation of the average Eskom consumer, especially those who are unable to face increasing tariffs. And she makes it clear that she's not an irresponsible, yet she's driven to utter despondency by the circumstances given. However, she does support the debt relief bill. Delegations, people who agreed with the bill, under the heading of delegations and authorizations, Pinky expresses that funding Eskom is crucial to save our economy, and as I mentioned as well, our country and its people definitely depend on electricity. The energy crisis takes away jobs, as many companies are closing down. So the sooner Eskom relief is granted, the better for every citizen, business, and investor interest. A great comment from Pinky. And this is just, as I said, this does reveal the public sentiment and can hopefully steer the committee in the correct direction as to what decisions to make on this bill. Suggestions, again, from the same group that does agree with it, however, under the direct charges for requirements of Eskom. Mark provided a fantastic comment. Mark will support this bill, but however, with conditions. Eskom management must be restructured, clear goals to set as how they would tackle the corruption, which hasn't been provided to the public yet. There's been lots of talk, but no clear action and no solutions over the past few years. There's been many changes of management, but it hasn't helped either. So no clear action. A great suggestion: people should pay Eskom directly in regions where municipalities do not have clear audits. That's a great suggestion there to avoid paying customers having their power cut off due to a municipality not paying their own bills. That does seem kind of unfair on the consumer. Key revenues collected directly from the consumer, and Eskom then allocated part of that revenue back to municipalities. Obviously, municipalities do earn a profit from Eskom tariffs, and it is used elsewhere. So it would be unfair to take away an income revenue stream from municipalities. However, a compensation model can be developed. And Mark raises a concern about municipalities that cannot be trusted, as we have seen with many failing municipalities in South Africa. And again, the concern around consumers paying yet being cut off nonetheless. Okay, there's another section from the Yes I Do, and there's people who just have no concern and fully agree with it, but do find other criteria. Christopher also provides a great comment. He knows that the purpose of the survey is to rally support against the bill, which, by the way, it isn't, but a lot of people will confuse it as a petition against it just because of the way the comments go. But nonetheless, it's a great comment from Christopher, and he wants to balance that view. He says Eskom is losing the confidence of the markets and the ability to raise outside debt, and if they do, it's always at a higher interest rate. And if we don't face reality, we will, the taxpayer will pay more either way. And if they force Eskom to keep tariffs low, then we may end up with a failed utility. So he expresses concern that a failing utility is a dangerous situation, and it will be an expensive problem to solve for the country and for government, and ultimately the taxpayer. Then we move into the not fully crowd, the people who support it or don't support it, however, with conditions. And a great comment from Jacobus. Eskom can only receive a loan from taxpayers if the company is privatized, as the government should not be in business. And this is a sentiment that is reflected throughout this section and throughout all the comments from the public as well. A strong call for privatization, either of the entire Eskom operation or of the broken apart one as proposed into generation, distribution, and so on. There should be privatization amongst that whole section. The government or Eskom can provide capital for startup projects from taxpayers, and this entity should refund the loan to the fiscus, after which it should be run for the benefit of taxpayers and by an organization that is not for profit, but only orientated in its operational stability and its operational stability orientated. In other words, focused on not making profits, but remaining solvent and providing its services. Okay, and then the next section is the not fully again, under the heading delegations of authorizations. The mess that's been created as a result of gross mismanagement and blatant corruption has brought Eskom to its knees to keep the lights on, and with that trying to rescue the economy. Len says that financial injection is definitely required, but again he's concerned about accountability, oversight, and the loss of funds through misappropriation and so on. He suggests independent supervision through independent auditors, and that's a great suggestion from Len. From the same section, direct charges for requirements of Eskom. Dane has an interesting suggestion there, where he suggests that Eskom's proposed direct charges against the National Revenue Fund be at 50% and increase electricity tariffs by 25%. And he gives the reasons as to why. By increasing tariffs and making it more expensive for consumers directly, the revenue generated by Eskom will increase immediately, and also it will place pressure on those who are able to install private generation systems, rooftop solar, and so on, which will alleviate the pressure on the generation and on the grid. Naomi makes a great suggestion. This is on the no, I do not, from the no, I do not participants. I think she sums up what needs to be done and what's expressed by the majority of the section. As I mentioned, most participants did say no to the Eskom debt relief bill. However, this gives a great reason as to why. Eskom has far too many employees. It's been stated publicly. It's been mentioned by international lending institutions as well, and by large auditing institutions. Is a overburdening salary and wage bill, which places more strain on the performance of the utility. There are many power stations that are not operating at full capacity. There is a concern around the shutting down or dismantling of existing power plants that could be refurbished and perhaps we need to look at this as a quick solution to the problems that we have now, instead of building new power stations and bringing in going through extra expense to just delay a problem that's going to resurface at a later stage. There's no clear plan on the future use of coal. The continued use of coal will impact South Africa's exports on to the European Union because of emission standards and sanctions against usage of coal and the move away from coal and fossil fuels. Doesn't seem to be enough noise about nuclear power stations, which we have only one in South Africa, or is it only half at this stage? But hopefully we will have a full operating one soon. That is South Africa's cheapest form of electricity, and perhaps there should be a look at expanding that capacity there. There's also the fraud through the cartels that have been reported on in the media, operating out of Eskom. Something needs to be done about that. And also the construction companies on Mudupi and Kusile for shoddy workmanship and breakdowns and so on. And Naomi mentions that Eskom debt should be restructured, not funded. Rosemary makes a great comment. Rosemary is in the details you'll see she's a pensioner and is retired. She made a comment there that she couldn't complete this survey yesterday because she didn't have internet connection because Eskom cut off our power. And I've seen a few comments from
Mr. Hutchinson.
Yes.
How much more time do you still need?
2 minutes, Chair. 2 minutes, Chair. Thank you. She couldn't cut off. She couldn't participate. She had to wait a couple of days, and it's a common experience here. Load shedding is affecting our work performance, is affecting the economy, and is taking a toll on people's lives. And Michael says as a taxpayer, he's had enough of bailing out Eskom. Other companies, municipalities and government departments must be forced to pay up. No free electricity, everyone should contribute no matter what. Same sentiment comes from Beverly under the No, I Do Not section. And as I mentioned, you can get all the full comments and a summary of the report in the notes that were provided yesterday. In conclusion, there's an overwhelming objection to the Eskom debt relief bill. However, an understanding of the need to keep the lights on, which is definitely expressed there, that there is a concern over the economy crashing, a total blackout, and so on. However, there are concerns over mismanagement, accountability, transparency, and corruption. Should the debt relief be provided to Eskom, strong and strict measures need to be put in place. And suggestions as an alternative include privatization, meaningful independent oversight of Eskom, its operations, and of course the issuing of the debt relief bill. And skilled managers and employees need to be put in place, and the operation needs to be free from political interference. As an overall note, public trust in Eskom's ability and within government's ability to oversee Eskom has most definitely eroded. So Eskom and the committee do have a job ahead of them in bringing up the public trust and making any actions more believable. And that's it. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present the voice of the public.
Mr. Hutchinson, thank you so much for the presentation. You may bring down your presentation.
All right, if I can.
Honorable members, as Mr. Hutchinson is busy taking down his presentation, let me get indications, or you know how we do it. Let me get indications of the honorable members who would like to have a go on the presentations made by the three presenters representing the three organizations. Yes, honorable members. Honorable Matafa.
Sheikh Imam, Chair.
Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Kaiso.
Honorable Kaiso.
Hlangweni.
Honorable Hlangweni. Any other honorable member who want to interact with the presentations of the public?
No, not today, Chair.
Honorable Tobias, thank you. Noted. Thank you. Honorable members, let me start with Honorable Matafa. Honorable Matafa, please start.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, Chair, members, and our guests. Chairperson, let me start by thanking the presenters for the contributions that they have made. Public participation, Chair, remains one of the most important principles of a democratic dispensation. And we really welcome them taking up on the opportunity to engage when lawmakers make decisions. Chair, I only have questions for COSATU and the Mineral Council. The first one is just to find out if whether, in terms of the view of COSATU, are there any other conditions that would have considered to be prudent in regards to the 254 billion debt relief package that is before us? Would they have proposed any other? And maybe what other advice would they give to the minister as the release of the funds, the timing thereof will be determined by the minister? Is there any other input that they can consider making? Chair, we know that slides 3, 14, and 15, together with 16, there's a mention for a need of a clear program of action to deal with the debt owed by municipalities. In the view of COSATU, why has Eskom, with the help of government, not implemented a clear debt recovery strategy, especially in instances where the debtors are in a position to repay? And maybe here, Chair, you can also stretch that to the inclusion of municipalities that are not honoring their debt obligations to Eskom. Chair, we also note that just like us, COSATU supports the relief package. But then again, there is a concern about the sustainability of the package. And one case in point is to just raise if whether will the relief for this relief being advanced, is there confidence that it can last for 10 years? Or will it totally relieve Eskom from its prevailing balance sheet shortcomings? So the question there in essence is just to find out if whether Eskom is comfortable that in the long run, this debt will be able to bolster the balance sheet of Eskom. Chair, to the Mineral Council, their recommendations emphasizes some sort of a wholesale of coal power plants to the private sector. Now, I'm just curious to find out if whether are they suggesting that we move towards privatization of electricity, and if the answer is yes, have we considered the weight of costs of coal of the power plants, especially in terms of the cost implications of over 8 million unemployed South Africans, and those South Africans who are also beneficiaries of the indigent electricity provision? Our fear, Chair, is that we all know that the private sector is driven by profit. And as a state, we are driven by service delivery and community service. So have they factored that the impact of privatization should maybe in the future, it is considered that indeed these power plants must be sold off to the private sector? The last one, Chair, it's just on slide 5. And it's about the second recommendation, which suggests that the power plants must operate through a public-private partnerships. And maybe we have a itemized input whereby the council unpacks its proposal or how this partnership should work, especially taking into consideration the developmental role of Eskom. It goes back to speak to the issue of profit, but now in a triple P, there will be some state role and also private sector role. How will we achieve a balance whereby Eskom is still able to assist the country in economic growth and ensuring that the government also achieves its mandate or its goal of eradicating inequality and electricity? We know the role that it plays in that regard. Have they considered how we should be able to maintain a balance of that? Chair, I will pause there and thanks again to the contributions made. We have noted the presentations and the recommendations, and definitely we will consider them in conclusion of this process. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Matafa. Honorable Sheikh Imam, please come in.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Allow me first to apologize. I've just come from a funeral, so I'm actually sitting in my motor vehicle, so I'll have my video off. But my apologies for that, Chairperson. My first question is this, to the Mineral Council, or maybe to all of them. What makes you believe that when you privatize, it can be a success, but if it is in the hands of public sector, it can't be a success? Should you rather not be concentrating on what are the shortcomings that state-owned companies like Eskom collapse? That's the first one. The second thing is this. On the issue of particularly privatization that we're talking about, and I see the emphasis is on privatization. Public-private partnership seems to be low on the list of priorities in any. Do we consider, like my colleague has just alluded, what the cost factor will be, number one? Number two, all those indigent families in the country who get free electricity, okay? The high cost of energy or electricity, if you are privatizing it, because like my colleague said just now, that the emphasis will be on profits, not on providing a service. Now, Eskom was created as a state-owned company for economic growth, to meet the demands of the energy supply in the country, but also to sustain itself and provide some revenue to the fiscus. It does nothing of the above, to be honest with you. Now, why is it that many of these institutions, and I'm not attacking you, you've been around for a long period of time while we've been going through this very difficult patch, where concerns were raised year in and year out on the issue in this particular case of Eskom, and we're going to run into trouble. Why has the council and others not done something about it all this time? Why did you not put pressure on government, raise these problems and these concerns so that we could have dealt with this long before it became a crisis like we are sitting with today? That's the other thing that I want to do, because one of the issues have been, and if you look at Eskom's problems, it stems from, first of all, no maintenance, not looking at future demand and building more power stations, corruption and looting, the skills where they gave packages and did not transfer the skills, sabotage, there's a whole host of things. But it didn't start, Chairperson, today. It started many, many years ago, in full view of all the organizations, community-based people, politicians, and very little or nothing was done. And at this late hour, we're sitting with a crisis. Now, I noticed, Chairperson, that we were recently putting a lot of emphasis on moving to renewable because of the high levels of emission, and which is a health hazard. But I noticed that the noise that we're getting when you want to privatize these to coal now is no longer there. So when it was under the public sector, the emissions are important, the health hazard is important. When you move to the private sector, there's no emphasis on the health hazard that it's going to cause to our people on the ground. Okay, but it clearly indicates there is a move to want to privatize and privatize. I want to give a good example. You know, right now, this country, and I'll move a little bit away, Chairperson, very quickly. The country is moving to only gold. All your currencies, everything is going to be valued based on gold reserves. Gold reserves. Okay. Now, South Africa has a lot of gold. It has enough coal. It has all the minerals, like many other countries, not in control of us. Okay. Don't you think if this belonged to the people of this country, rightfully so, and remained in control of the people of this country, like what Gaddafi did there, where the revenue from his oil used to go directly into the accounts of his people, benefited with free education, health, housing, and everything. Shouldn't the emphasis be there, but then deal with the root causes of why they are failing, rather than just very conveniently privatizing, selling them like SAA for 51 Rand. So that is my other concern as far as that is concerned. Then the issue that I have here is we are told that Eskom has too many employees. This matter has been raised again and again. Will COSATU and others come to the aid of government to be able to deal with this problem? And in many sectors, we find that even in the water section and sanitation, Chairperson, remember, we absorbed a whole lot of employees, okay, and they're getting paid, which means you've got too much of employees, which is having an impact, you know, on cost as far as Eskom is concerned. Will you be able to work together with government so that we could eradicate this problem as far as that is concerned once and for all? Now, my other, I don't know if I'm running out of time, Chair, because I think you've got limited time there.
No.
It's okay, Chair? Okay.
Continue.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Chair. Yeah. Now, my other concern is this. There are countries, like I give you an example, like China, who has offered many years ago to come to the rescue of South Africa or to the African continent as well when it comes to energy. Now, and if you remember, the Chinese built a hospital in a couple of weeks, a complete hospital during COVID. Why are we not looking at the moment, taking into consideration? We have ample supply of coal in South Africa, good quality coal. Yes, the emphasis is on exporting that coal because many countries need it. But the revenue, limited revenue comes to the country because already those is in private hands in any event. So they are laughing all the way to the bank with their exports. Okay, if you go renewable, they will be benefiting because a lot of them already got their hands in renewable energy in the country. Now, when you privatize it into these coal, privatize some of them, they're going to get their hands in there. So you can see the picture, the scenario that we are facing. What is the real intention here? So come back to the issue. The Chinese have offered to assist us. Why are we not able to, with the ample supply we got, simultaneously, like the Minister of Energy is saying, you need your coal as a base and your renewable energy to deal with the rest of the demand? Why is there no emphasis? And that's what I want to hear today. The pressure should be that we need a solution now, today, because these dreams we're having of 10 years and 5 years is not going to work. People have got a crisis. The economy is collapsing at the moment. That's what's happening. Businesses are shutting down. People are becoming unemployed. What can we do? Should we not even consider building new power stations rather than not having the supply at all? Because the renewable is clear is not being provided. And there's no guarantee that the private sector is going to buy these coal mines in any case. And if it could work, they should work here. So I want to know, why could we not take advantage, even with the Chinese who's offering and others who seems to be experts on this? Remember, China is building new power stations now, called new. South Korea is building new. United States talking about 2054 to eradicate. Only South Africa was in a hurry. And you've even, I think, shut down one in Mpumalanga, affecting jobs there, reduced your generation capacity. Nobody seems to want to talk about these things. So let me stop there for now, Chairperson. But I think the emphasis should be on what can we do in the short term before the economy collapses totally because of the energy supply. And lastly, just taking you 1 minute or 1 second away, the crisis you got with energy today is the crisis 10 times worse you're going to have in a couple of years as far as water in South Africa. So prepare yourselves. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Sheikh Imam. Honorable Kaiso, please come in.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. And thank you for the presenters. Chair, I just want to venture into just a few questions here. I'm not sure whether will this also cover the submission of other people who did not necessarily present here. People like the Nedbank and Mr. Brown or Mr. Cronin submissions. Chair, to COSATU, I just want to ask these two questions. One is, I didn't hear the view of COSATU on the issue of exemption of Eskom on accounting. So I'm interested to hear the view of COSATU. Secondly is, I think, Chair, we stretch ourselves on the issue of, Eskom's generation and the relationship between the generation capacity, and non-investing in that. Whereas the maintenance of Eskom is going to need, its generation capacity. But apparently, as we have been reading since yesterday, it seems that we may lock around here. So I just want to get to understand from COSATU, what is it that you read there, that relationship that exists, that is the generation capacity and the maintenance. What do you think that it's gonna be an easy route towards maintenance in the absence of generation, as COSATU thinks? And thirdly, perhaps is to agree, Honorable Chair, this issue, the issue of the clause which is related to negotiations. I think that clause it's actually misplaced there as a condition, because we were not dealing with conditions of employment. We're dealing with the issue of Eskom debt relief. So maybe it's going to be advisable that clause be deferred to issues which are related to bargaining, chamber as COSATU proposes. On Mineral Council comments on 2023 Eskom bill, I just want to understand, because I see Mineral Council as a comparison of USA, China, and South Africa, and of which my understanding is that we are dealing with the first world country and the third world country. And I just want to know from you, what informs your understanding that the coal must be done away with, or be as if in the USA coal is being done away with? Because my understanding is that the same USA has an appetite to get coal from us. So what makes you believe that now? Because you are saying like USA. I don't understand how it's like USA, whereas the same USA has an appetite to get the same coal from us. so that they use it. I don't understand how do you bring this question there. So the Mineral Council, you are also saying that, let me ask you, why are you saying transmission should be surrendered to private sector? And yet you talk about staff morale or staff decline because of decommission threats. So I see it to be, a contradiction, because you're acknowledging that there are threats in as far as job losses or something, which will affect the workers. But at the same time, you say this must be surrendered to private sector. I just want to understand what you mean by that. I also want to ask the private sector companies. Yes, we do see that a number of municipalities, a larger percentage of them, they owe Eskom a lot of money. But I don't see in your presentation putting forward how much do private companies owe Eskom themselves, because I do believe that the private companies also have their contribution towards this, but I don't hear Mineral Council arguing that plus the private companies has the obligation to pay Eskom the debt that they owe to them. Now, so the issue of private company, yes, I've covered it. Now, Honorable Chair, I think the issues that are raised by, like I was trying to check, that there are also other written submissions which seek to, influence the influence in the bin, like your net bank and Mr. Cronin. So maybe we may not just take them for granted as they are not presented here, but they have made submissions which in some instances have some legal background, a lot of legal background that needs a check from the committee level, which if perhaps not taken into consideration may put us, we may stuck somewhere in as far as these legal issues have been raised, especially which Mr. Brown seek to cover in terms of powers and whatnot. So we need to have our own legal check in as far as those inputs are concerned. And on NetBank, despite being in NetBank, it also raises a number of issues which are related to conditions as to the conversions.
Honorable Tyson.
Honorable Chair.
Sorry, please pardon me, because what I want us to do is to confine ourselves to the presentations by the three presenters, and then let's see how we deal with other matters. If you will allow that. Okay.
No, it's fine, Chair. So let me end my input here, and then I'll come back where it's necessary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Kaiso. Honorable Tlangwini.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm in full agreement with what the Honorable Sheikh and Kaiso and Honorable Oscar have raised in terms of the role of electricity in our communities. And should it be privatized, who will be the individuals that will suffer the most? Chair, in 2013, I think 2014, as a country, we're pushed into no renewables, we must get wind turbines, we must get solar panels and all of that. And there was just this whole campaign about renewable energy. And then it seems that now all of a sudden we get presentations, even in yesterday's Eskom presentation, yeah, there is made mention to the sun doesn't shine 24 hours and the wind doesn't blow every day. But I mean, in 2013 and 2014, when there was a campaign for renewable energy, surely we should have known that. So I think we are being played by the private sector and these other countries that are using South Africa just for their mineral wealth and nothing else to benefit their countries. Now, I want to check, I haven't heard from all of the speakers that have presented, and we spoke about the huge municipal debt, and Honorable Matava have also alluded to the private sector debt as well to Eskom. But what we can't seem to find is there any recommendations from them, and especially the Mineral Council as well, any recommendations that they can bring to the committee or to the minister to say, how do we handle this huge debt crisis from the municipality or the private sector, so that Eskom can be able to or those individuals that are owing Eskom may in order to assist them to service their debt. Because I mean, there must be a way that we can assist each other. As we speak now, Scopa is having the former CEO of Eskom, and he's bluntly refusing even to answer questions for that matter. He said it like, just on a trip of, I will tell you what I think you deserve to know. So that we, for instance, but he speaks also about the corruption within Eskom. But what I'm still struggling to figure out from these public hearings, give us recommendations so that we can also assist Eskom and the public. In terms of the privatization, Chair, of some of the components of Eskom, the Mineral Council have spoken to that, alluded to that. But what I want to find out from them as well, because they are talking about privatization, how will we be able to curb the private sector to not increase the price of electricity to such a high level that a person in Kraddock, Gravernet, Statelerville, and all of these smaller communities that are high in poverty can still afford electricity? How will we be able to manage that? Because even now, we're having a private sector in, especially the mines in our communities, that even not that are not even doing the sorry, Chair, the social responsibility in building of schools, crashes, and so forth, and ensuring that when they are doing exploration or all of that, the houses of communities are getting cracked and those houses are being fixed. So how will we ensure that when we are privatizing these components that you are actively advocating needs to be privatized, how will we ensure that these municipalities, these mines will be ensuring that electricity are not that high, and also that they adhere to their social responsibility? I think that is all the two from me from now, Chair.
Honorable Nhlangwini, thank you very much. Let me just check with Oral Matafa. Anything which came to your mind?
Sorry, Chair, I missed that. Are you calling me?
Yes, Honorable, I'm giving you the second chance if there's anything that you'd like to raise.
No, Chairperson, I'm okay. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Sheikh Imam. Honorable Sheikh Imam. Honorable Kaiso.
No, I'm covered, Chair.
Honorable Tlangwini, I could feel that you are struggling with flu. Anything again? I'm sure you've got your breath back.
Chair, I'm still recovering, Chair. At least, say right, please. I had a huge one, but I'm still in recovery, but I'm much better. The last one, Chair, just to the Mineral Council, and maybe perhaps also to the other, maybe COSATU and the other public, the other organizations that are here that have appetite to answer. What are the outlook in terms of other energy sources that the country can use, pertaining to also maybe we can use floating ships and so forth, that we can get electricity from China, Russia, and all of that to sort out the load shedding issue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Tlangwini. Let me come in and start by thanking all the presenters for their sharing of information with the committee and giving us an opportunity to raise some questions. This question goes to all the presenters and is related to the issue has been raised by the oral members. We are proposing the privatization of all coal-fired power stations. So the question is, are you aware that one of the mandates of Eskom is a developmental mandate, the provision of the public good? What would happen to that once these coal-fired power stations are sold to the private sector? Do you think that this model will be able to go to rural areas, far-flung areas to provide electricity? The next question, this one goes to Mr. Motsa. In the IRP 2019 by the Minister of Minerals and Energy, there was liberalization of generation of electricity, where private sector was allowed to generate its own electricity. I just want to check, what have you been able to take advantage of this new opportunity? What are your members doing? Because there is an opportunity to start your own as far as generation is concerned. I just want to get to the progress. What are you doing as far as that is concerned? Because as you would know, before that, there was a clamoring of open generation for us to, when I'm saying us, I'm meaning private sector in general. What has happened as far as that is concerned? Again, this goes to Mr. Motsa. Tariffs of Eskom have been increasing exponentially over the years. What would be the impact of your recommendation on the tariffs? Remember, you're already dealing with stressed consumers. As you indicated, you spoke about 900% increase on the tariffs. My experience is that whenever private sector gets involved, tariffs and prices increase. Your comment? Yeah, again to Mr. Motsa. You are raising the problem of moral hazard when it comes to debt relief of municipalities. Unfortunately, you just end up raising that problem and you are not seeing what we should do. I think this is the point which has been made. The reality, just to share with you, is that this debt keeps on increasing year in, year out. The Minister of Finance proposes prepaid meters, a position which was supported by COSATU here. What is your take on this condition as a condition of a debt relief to municipalities? I hear Mr. Hutchinson, this comes to you. I understand the concern, but what is the proposal again of dealing with load shedding? Do they understand, I mean, the people that you are talking to in your survey, do they understand the impact of load shedding on the economy, on unemployment, on health, education? And what would happen, for instance, if Eskom is allowed to fail? It goes to COSATU. What do you think the reason for the Minister of Finance is to put a condition of Eskom not to invest in electricity generation? The last one goes to, again, to Mr. Mutsa. Corruption has been raised as a factor in load shedding by Eskom. You know, as well as I know, that private sector has been party to that corruption too. So privatization per se doesn't solve that problem. But as my question to the council, do you think it is fair for some of your members to have evergreen contracts with Eskom? Is that not some form of corruption? And what should be done about that? Let me allow you to respond to these questions the way you presented. So, Mr. Muzea, the first one, to respond to the questions that have been raised by the honorable members. Thank you very much. Mr. Mutsa, still there?
I'm still here, Chair, Honorable Chair. Was just looking for my guest. It was all over the place.
No problem.
I will just I thank you, Honorable Chair and honorable members, for the questions that you posed to all of us as presenters or stakeholders. Perhaps to preface my my answers, I'll just start by saying that the issue of privatization, let me just switch off. The issue of privatization, the fear of privatization in the electricity space, perhaps we can learn something from the telecommunications sector. The telecommunications industry, which is made up of the MTN, Vodacom.
Mr. Mutsa,
yes,
we could hear you very well. So
yes.
Our optimal position is that we see your face.
Okay. So the fear of privatizing the electricity industry, for us, we feel that there are lessons to be learned in the telecommunications sector, because that industry is predominantly privatized. We can remember that there were also fears before the liberalization of that sector that cell phone charges would be too high and won't be affordable for most of people in South Africa. But lessons that we have learned is that, you know, if you think about the number of connections, people with cell phones in South Africa, recent statistics point to the fact that 90 million, there are 90 million connections in South Africa. So in a population of 60 million, it just tells us that at least one person, this is just an average, of course, not everyone has a cell phone. At least one person has an average of almost 1.5 cell phones. So you can see the coverage there, that a lot of people, despite the fact that the sector has been privatized, a lot of people have access to cell phones. So we can learn lessons from that. And the fact that also the regulator, ICASA, has played a pivotal role in ensuring that cell phone charges do not, of course, I mean, as South Africa, our charges are still really high relative to what we experience in the rest of Africa. But what we're saying is that most people in the country have access to cell phones, despite the fact that the industry has been privatized. The second point that I would like to make relates to government really running out of money. And it's a point that I expressed in my presentation, is that because of competing objectives, governments eventually run out of money because they have to take care of health, they have to build schools, they have to ensure that South Africans are secure. So all of those objectives, you find that eventually, if the state-owned companies are not capitalized. An example here, had it not been for the fact that the IDC is invested in most or in some private sector companies, the last time the IDC was capitalized by the sole shareholder government was in 1950, just before Sasol was established. So you can see that over the years, the IDC has not been capitalized. And so what we see in Eskom not being sufficiently capitalized by government is something that we have seen with the IDC. So we shouldn't really be scared of privatizing privatizing Eskom. The last point in my preface, then I'll just go answer the questions directly. The last point that I want to talk to is that when Eskom was established, it was to address a particular market failure. Eskom was established in 1923. And the market failure at the time was the fact that the entities that were supplying electricity, especially to the mining sector, were not sufficiently supplying electricity to South Africa. So when government consolidated those companies to form Eskom, that market failure was addressed because electricity, the project was to electrify the rest of South Africa and to have sufficient or adequate electricity supply to the rest of the economy, including the markets, the mining sector. So with that market failure having been addressed, and also we need to remember that when Eskom was established in 1923, it was to provide cheap electricity. And that resulted in the industrialization of South Africa as we know it. So currently, the only market failure in our view that exists is in respect of the rural electrification program. But we also need to remember that South Africa, about 90% of South Africa is now electrified. So the objective has more or less been met, that most of South Africa having been electrified, at least 90% of the country is electrified. You now are remaining with the 10%. So how do we electrify the 10%? Well, there are remote solutions such as solar. But also our proposal regarding privatizing the electricity sector, you would have the regulator, which is NERSA here, would attach the application of the private sector to escalate tariffs. They would attach there a term which relates to what have they done in electrifying the rural South Africa. And here we can learn from countries such as Saudi Arabia and other developing countries on how really you can have a term in that tariff escalation equation, a term that talks to the private sector electrifying non-electrified areas of their country. So in essence, we're saying we really should not be scared of privatization. Then the specific, now answering the specific questions, relating to slide 5, where we propose that the coal-fired power plants must be sold or concessioned. I think the question there is, does this suggest that we should have a direct move towards privatization? To be honest, our view is that yes, we should, as soon as possible, a move to privatizing Eskom. Because to be honest, Eskom is really bleeding the fiscus. And then there's also the question of whether we have weighed the costs of the coal-fired power plants, especially in terms of cost implications on over 8 million unemployed South Africans. Well, the long and short of it is no. But let us remember as well that the price of those coal-fired power plants would be determined by the market. In fact, by government spending 250 billion rands on Eskom, it is actually depriving the 8 million people of much needed services in education, services in the training of teachers and paying them well. It's also depriving those 8 million people of good quality health services, even the building of hospitals, and training nurses and doctors and paying them well. So if the private sector could assist with taking that burden from the state, so that the state uses basically those resources to help the poor, the 8 million that we're talking about here, that really would be a moment achievement. So we also have to talk about tariffs. Tariffs for most indigent households, and here we can use the technical term, we call them the Homelight 20M customers. Tariffs, they are already subsidized. Those are the indigent households. They are already subsidized to the tune of 400 billion rands annually. And that 400 billion rands is paid by heavy or large users of electricity, including the manufacturing sector or the industrial sector and mining companies. In fact, as we speak, the indigent households, the Homelight 20M customers, their increase, whilst the rest of the economy is experiencing 18.65% increase in tariffs starting in April, they are experiencing only 10%. And in fact, the subsidy for this year for that segment of customers, Eskom customers, the subsidy is not 400 billion, but it's 1.2 billion. And who's going to pay that? It's the private sector, mainly mining companies and large users of electricity. Then there's the question of slide 5 about I think talks about recommendations suggesting that coal power plants be operated by the public-private partnerships. And perhaps if the Minerals Council has a view, can unpack this proposal. Well, can unpack this proposal. Let me just finish the question, especially taking into consideration the developmental role of Eskom. One thing we know certainly about Eskom now is that Eskom is no longer, in fact, Eskom is not playing that developmental role because tariffs have been escalating at an annual average, a double-digit annual average since 2007. So that on its own just shows that Eskom is no longer playing that developmental role. So the only area where Eskom is doing so, perhaps in playing that role, is in the area of rural electrification, the rural electrification program. But even there, there is very little that Eskom, in recent years, I must say that, there is very little that Eskom is doing. But also there are also solutions, the ubiquitous nature of the remote solutions. And here we're specifically talking about solar. There's very little role for Eskom to play in electrifying the 10% that is not electrified. And as I said earlier, if you have the private sector playing a role or Eskom privatized, the regulator could play a role in adding a term in the application, in that formula, where generators or electricity generation companies approach the regulator to ask for annual increases, you could have a term there which talks to electrification of the non-electrified areas in South Africa. And that term could, if they have electrified in that period, electrified those areas in that period, then that term would play an increasing role in the tariffs. But if they haven't, that term would play a role where it reduces the level at which the private companies are applying to increase tariffs by. So and then there's also the question of on slide 6 of our presentation, where we specifically talk about the transmission being concessioned to the private sector for a period of 15 to 20 years. And there the question is that are we aware if these proposals are informed by specific research? Well, we recently made a submission to the private sector participation in the rail space, and when we solicited the comments from member companies or mining companies, one of the things they said that 10 years is just too little for those companies that would operate a rail concession to break even. So they suggested that 15 to 20 years would be most ideal. And also this talks to some of the concessions in the freeways as well. That of course I don't know how many years, but from my understanding is that it's 10 years or more, so that those companies could break even, and also so that you attract those companies to bid for those concessions. So I'll now go to some of the questions that were not necessarily in written form, that was just articulated by the honorable members. One question was, maybe let me start from Honorable Sheikh Imam. He asked, what makes the Minerals Council believe that privatization is ideal? I think the point really, I've already articulated this point, that the point is that governments eventually run out of money. And we're not saying that the private sector will always have the funds. You know, you've had private companies running electricity companies abroad, such as in the US, collapsing. But the model has proven that it's a model that works. And because government, again, the point is government has competing objectives. And in our context, also the issue of corruption. Again, we're not saying that in the private sector there's no corruption, but we are saying that because private companies usually have a sole focus, so they are able to maintain the assets, they are able to operate it very well, they're able to attract skills because usually they pay well. So it is ideal that the private sector be the one that, quite honestly, to the point is that Eskom should be privatized. Then the issue of public-private partnership, what is the cost factor in respect to indigent households? I do think that we've answered this question, because even as we speak, the private sector is subsidizing indigent households. And as I've said, from April, it's to the tune of 1.2 billion. And that, to the current tariffs, to the increase, it adds about 10% to the increase for private companies, or for the private sector, or large users of electricity from April to March next year. As to what the Minerals Council or mining companies are doing in terms of increasing supply or taking advantage of the fact that there's been liberalization, especially of I must say that the Minerals Council has 9 gigawatts of renewable projects lined up, and that amounts to about 100 billion rands. Some of those projects will be commissioned this year, and most of them actually will be commissioned in the next year, which is 2024. So already we have taken advantage of that liberalization, but perhaps while still there, I must also say that other technologies that we would really support is nuclear, but as well that must be done by the private sector. And the reason for nuclear is that we actually really do need baseload. The reason we have been deindustrializing as a country is because we actually do not, Eskom is no longer supplying that baseload power to allow investment into the manufacturing sector. And that is why, and also the fact of the double-digit annual escalations, that has been making our exporters, mining and manufacturing, to lose global competitiveness. And as they lose global competitiveness, you find that they shed jobs. And that is why there's been a contraction in the number of people employed, especially in mining, of which I'm representing. Then there is the question by Honorable Aiso, why we're comparing the US and China, and there we included South Africa. Basically, the point is that the US, as a developed economy, the point there we wanted to highlight is that as a developed economy, the US is deindustrializing, has been deindustrializing for more than a decade as we speak, because China has been competitive. And that chart, in fact, we're just showing how the manufacturing or industrial sector in those countries is consuming electricity, and we're just showing the trajectory there. And we're saying South Africa, since 2011, the industrial sector as well has been consuming less and less electricity. And it is not because of a decoupling of energy consumption and manufacturing. No, it's strictly because, one, there's very little supply, inadequate supply of electricity in the economy, and also the fact that our tariffs has been escalating by more than CPI inflation. In terms of transmission to the private sector, the reason why we're saying that must be concessioned to the private sector is, again, the fact that the private sector would be able to recapitalize it without using the fiscus. I think that is the point. On how much do private companies owe Eskom, I do not have that number, but I think the reason why the municipal debt is published by Eskom is because it is such a major risk on the utilities balance sheet, and that is why it is published. I know that if the private sector was owing that much to Eskom, those figures as well would be published. But it seems to me that it doesn't present a major risk to Eskom. It's so minuscule that it really doesn't. It's not worth publishing. Then, Honorable Ntlangwini, you asked the question: how do you cap the private sector from increasing tariffs beyond the reach of poor households? As I've mentioned, those poor households already are being subsidized. The regulator could include a term in the equation of annual increases to say that this term relates to subsidization of poor households, just like we have in the MYPD. So I think to be honest, even as we speak now, the tariffs are not affordable for some households in our economy. So having the private sector, my view is that it's not going to make things worse. But in fact, what would happen is that it would increase supply. And as we know, with supply increasing, you are likely to have lower prices in the long run. The reason tariffs are high or are increasing at this rate is because there is very little supply. And so we know the supply and demand equation, that the supply has to be equal to demand. And so prices serve as the balancing factor. If supply is low, prices have to increase. If supply is high, prices have to drop. On the other, supply technologies that we perhaps support, yes, I've spoken about nuclear to provide baseload power. That would be important. To be honest, it's a pertinent question, because here we are in South Africa. We have the skills and the know-how by running Quebec, but nuclear, we never talk about nuclear. We do talk a lot about the intermittent technologies. And here, really, we have the experience on running nuclear projects. So it is, perhaps it's a question to the honorable members as to why don't we have nuclear? Why can't we attract nuclear investment and run by the private sector so that we increase the supply of electricity in South Africa? Honorable Chair, you asked if we are aware that one of the mandates of Eskom is being a developmental state. Yes, we are aware, but quite honestly, Eskom is no longer playing that role now. In some pockets of the country, some people argue that our tariffs are still competitive if you convert them to US dollars. Yes, that is true, but our major problem is that the tariffs are increasing at a faster rate, more than inflation, and also the fact that most of our inputs are denominated in rands, not dollars. So if your inputs are denominated in rands and those inputs increase by more than inflation, and worse, you cannot transfer those cost increases to the final product, then it becomes a real sticky point. It becomes a real sticky point. Whilst they are cheap in dollar terms, but our costs are denominated in rands, we are really losing global competitiveness. The export sector in South Africa has lost competitiveness. And this is manifested by the fact that there's been a lot of job losses in the mining sector, as well as the manufacturing sector. In fact, in recent times, we'll be joined by the agricultural sector because they're suffering as well because of load shedding. Then, Honorable Chair, you also asked about the IRP 2019, about the liberalization, whether we've taken advantage of that. I've already alluded to the fact that we have taken advantage of that, by the fact that, evidenced by the fact that we have 9 gigawatts of renewable projects in the pipeline. And these are projects that are not just on paper, but projects that will come to fruition, that will be commissioned in the next year, in fact, this year, next year, and also the next 2025. So we have taken advantage of that liberalization. You also asked about the tariffs, exponential increases in tariffs, and the fact that once the private sector enters that market, your experience is that there's been significant increases in tariffs or prices. But we can take a cue from the telecommunications sector, as I stated earlier, that you have 90 million connections, people connected to cell phones, to these networks. And we have a population of 60 million. So our view is that eventually there will be that balance in prices, where, because we are increasing supply and the private sector is playing a major role in that increasing electricity supply, eventually your tariffs will stabilize. Because the other thing about the tariffs is the predictability. We want predictability in tariff increases. And at the moment, we do not have that predictability. You have the 18%, 18.65% now, but remember that we have not included the revenue clearing account, which we call the RCA. And the RCA amounting to billions of rands. If you include that, that will add much more to the annual increases. So again, the issue is not just about the fact that there's double-digit increases annually, but the fact that the tariffs are not predictable. Our view is that you have the private sector, you have Eskom privatized. It is like the likelihood is that you will have more supply, but also you'll have predictability in tariff increases. We also asked Honorable Chair about the moral hazard. We do support the prepaid meters, but we also have to deal with the legacy municipal debt. Quite honestly, I think we do not have an immediate solution. Prepaid meters are a solution going forward. But what do we say about the legacy municipal debt? At the moment, quite honestly, we do not have a solution. But we do think that it does really create a moral hazard. If you forgive, you write off the debt now, what about in future? But we also do support the proposal that, but I think this will require an amendment in the legislation, where Eskom is the sole collector of revenues for electricity, and then Eskom could then distribute the amount that is due to municipalities, because Eskom has proven that they're actually good at collecting other revenues except for municipalities, because as well there you also have the political element. So we do support the two proposals, the prepaid meters, as well as the fact that all customers in SA should actually be paying Eskom directly. But that is in the event that there's no privatization, because under a private sector model, then the customers will directly pay those entities or those companies. And then there was a question, maybe last two questions or one question. The last question is about corruption relating to our members. I just didn't get the question properly, Chair. So I think I'm not in a position to answer it at the moment. Perhaps I can wait for the other colleagues as you. Maybe if you want the question answered again, I can hear from you. But I think this is where I can end my my answers. And thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Musa. We are going to have the second round. I'll remind you what the question was. Okay, then you can properly prepare for it. Comrade Matthew.
Okay, no, thanks very much, Chair, to members for the questions.
I know, Comrade Matthew, that the former CEO of Eskom doesn't like this thing of us calling each other comrades.
Well, in fact, Honorable Chair, he came to our Nedlac Labour School in January, and the comments were calling him Comrade Director, and he said he took it as a compliment. Yeah, no, thanks, Chair, to members for the questions. I think just to Honorable Mataf around, our thoughts around additional conditions for the Eskom debt relief. We would have supported additional conditions, for example, around it being required to tackle and to show progress on the issue of corruption, of wasteful expenditure, and so forth. Obviously, it will need to have the necessary support from the state, from Treasury, from the law enforcement institutions, etc. We would have welcomed additional conditions requiring Eskom to invest in new generation capacity. Those are not there. I think our concerns, Chair, on the conditions of the debt relief package is that we're basically tying Eskom's hands behind its back. We're telling it not to invest in new generation capacity. It might make sense to say, yes, focus on investing in existing maintenance, on existing capacity. Sure, we'd support that. But to prohibit Eskom completely when it has aging power stations, some of them are over 50 years of age, will increasingly be more and more difficult to maintain, etc., to invest in. So to prohibit Eskom from investing in new generation capacity, Chair, to us makes no sense. We're basically actually threatening Eskom's own long-term sustainability and survival in that regard. On the issue of municipal debt, so we don't have a debt recovery plan from the state. The debt levels of Eskom a couple of years ago for municipal debt was about 40 billion rand. It's now 57 billion rand, and it's rising. To be fair to Eskom has done a lot of work around trying to recover some of the municipal debt. They've gone to court to take many of these delinquent municipalities to court to attach assets, etc. And I think not because they wanted to do that as a first choice, but because out of frustration that many of these municipalities have been owing Eskom for years and years, have shown no interest in settling the debt. Some of these municipalities reached debt settlement plans with Eskom and then quickly reneged on them. And again, all this time, government was silent. We had a previous Minister of Finance who came to Parliament about 4 years ago, made a big noise and said he's going to deal with it, etc. We have not heard from him, and he's since left the political scene. Salga and Cogta, you don't hear a word from them. They seem not to be concerned about how, under their watch, municipalities are actually threatening Eskom and in effect are threatening the survival of the entire economy. But I think maybe to be fair to Salga, they are correct to say that, look, local government owes Eskom 57 billion rand, but also communities, businesses, even government institutions owe local government about 280 billion rand. So clearly the system's not working. Chair, if you look at 10 years ago, 90% of municipalities were fine, 10% were in financial crisis. Today it's been reversed. Now it's 90% of municipalities are in financial crisis. We have about 27 municipalities who can't pay their staff on time anymore. So we can continue to ignore the crisis consuming local government, and it's fine, but then this is the consequences of doing that. Eskom is now paying the price for the collapse of local government. Chair, I think to Honorable Matafa about can this debt relief package be successful? We think it can, but it's not going to be easy shortcut. There's no shortcut. Eskom has to deal with the issue of corruption and wasteful and fruitful expenditure. I think we've all seen the horror stories of Eskom over many years, spending ridiculous amounts on bottled water or black plastic bags or chairs or knee pads, etc. Eskom needs to invest in maintenance, as the debt relief package calls for, but equally needs to invest in new generation capacity because this is going to help ensure Eskom on a longer term path has got more affordable levels of operational costs. It needs to be given a support to tackle municipal debt. We all need to move to prepaid electricity meters, as the Minister of Finance correctly calls for. Chair, I think also, Eskom and Treasury can say they need 18% tariff hikes this year, 12% next year. All that's going to do is to continue to push Eskom into a debt spiral. So those companies, the mining industry, shopping centers, any company which can afford to do so, even any middle class home which can afford to do so, will just go off grid, and you're going to shrink Eskom's customer base further and further. Eskom is then going to respond by increasing tariffs even higher, because it's not going to just simply, be able to reduce its operational costs. And then it's going to become a death spiral. People are going to go off grid. So I think that's why we're saying we need to have a cost-reflective regime at Eskom, which really makes sense and isn't just simply a subsidy for mismanagement and corruption and a lack of investment, etc., etc. Chair, I think just to Honorable, Sheikh Imam, look, I think for us, we hear the debate about privatization. It's always going to be there. I think we all have our different viewpoints, and it's fine. But I think, Chair, we should not put the private sector on a pedestal. The private sector has got a role to play. It will always be the largest employer of workers in an economy, etc., the largest source of investment. We have long all been saying that the private sector must end its investment strike. So we need to have a discussion about how do we assist ending that investment strike. They should invest in public goods, infrastructure, etc., because the state will never have enough money on its own. That's true. But I think we mustn't also pretend that everything is okay with the private sector. We might recall that Parliament has been discussing, the nation has been discussing a national shame of a prisoner who escaped from a privately run prison in Mangaung Correctional Center. So that was privatization, didn't end well at all. So there's a role for the private sector, definitely, But equally, there's a role for the state as well, both as a regulator, also as a provider of certain essential developmental goods and so forth. I think there are a lot of fears about the private sector being the sole provider or becoming the provider of electricity, because will they really take into account the need to invest in infrastructure in rural parts of Limpopo? Will they really be bothered about providing free electricity to pensioners, to indigenous households, to informal areas, etc.? We were a bit skeptical of that. And again, you can look at the other things the private sector provides, where often they do neglect the poor, the marginalized communities. Look at the banking sector. You will struggle to find bank branches in rural parts of Limpopo. People have to travel 60 kilometers to get to a bank branch, etc. So let's find the right balance, but we don't think the wholesale selling of public goods is a solution. Chair, I think if you look at the South African Revenue Service, it shows that if you invest in competent management, you invest in staff capacity, you employ the right amount of staff, etc. You invest in the capacity of the institution, they'll do well. SARS has been on a positive turnaround for the past 3 years. We've seen them exceeding collection targets for the state by about 90 billion rand, simply because you put in place competent staff, management, you invest in the systems, etc. You allow them to deal with criminality. So I think we should find the right balance. But of course, we also should remember, Chair, about 10 years ago, plus, most of our SOEs were world-class, highly regarded institutions, be it SAA, Eskom, all of them, Transnet, Metrorail. They were very efficient. What happened is that we allowed mismanagement, corruption, we failed to invest in the capacity, etc. So I think we want to see them get back on their feet. We need to fix the crisis. But simply to say, let's close shop, that's not going to be a solution, Chair. And it's not just us who have learned those lessons. I think if you look at the United Kingdom, they've privatized rail and they've struggled ever since that time. Chair, I think also there are positive examples we can learn from across the world on how to run SOEs properly, efficiently, to meet the state's objectives, to help grow the economy, and of course not to be a burden upon the state. And I think you've seen in China, Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, positive examples, Sweden, Norway, and so forth. There are positive examples. Chair, just on the issue of the staffing at Eskom, I think also Honorable Sheikh Imam also raised it. So look, in our Eskom Social Compact, which government signed in 2020, we had raised that issue. We had wanted to avoid what the previous Minister of Finance and the previous chair of Eskom were saying about retrenchment at Eskom. Then they were talking about a bloodbath of Eskom retentions. We were pleased that government and Eskom agreed not to do that route, that you could rather look at the issues of natural attrition. In any workplace, about 5% of staff every year will retire, will resign or pass away, etc. You could look at redeployment. You need to do a skills audit to make sure you actually have the skills you require and so forth, and when you don't have them, to find a way to bring them. And to invest in Eskom staff. I think, Chair, we've seen in Eskom actually that the headcount is no longer a problem. It's decreased from 47,000 to about 42,000 in the past few years, simply through natural attrition. But Eskom's management is actually raising correctly the issue that they're feeling a brain drain of skilled employees, that there's a need to invest in new, younger staff coming on board to ensure Eskom's, again, its survival longer term. Chair, I think on the issue of China, no, look, I think we must welcome any kind of withdrawals to invest in South Africa, be it China, Spain, whichever country, it's fine. But again, we shouldn't be outsourcing our responsibilities and our failures to other countries. We have a responsibility to fix them. We have the capacity to fix it. There's nothing that South Africa cannot produce. And so hence, if we want to deal with the issues, we should fix them. The issue of Komati, Chair, so Komati hasn't been closed, but it's been repurposed. But I think the point is that as you repurpose some of these old power stations, you should ensure that you don't plunge those communities into economic depression, because you will see there's less jobs available on these power stations repurposed. So we need to make sure there is a just transition, that we don't leave workers in the value chain, the communities behind, etc. So, Chair, just to Honourable Kaiso, on the annual financial statements for Eskom. So look, I mean, as COSATU, we were not impressed or convinced by government's motivation. We thought it just was madness. The optics were disastrous. The timing was terrible. It was a really unnecessary own goal. But I think we are quite pleased that the Minister of Finance did respond very positively to public comments very quickly. He's asked for public comments. We've made submissions as COSATU. So we hope we can find the right approach to it. We hear the argument about wanting Eskom and even Transnet, which got similar exemptions, to be able to improve the financial statements so they get better credit ratings, etc. So the interest and loans become more affordable to them in the future. Sure, okay, but we're a little bit skeptical of that argument. We don't think that lenders will simply only look at your annual financial statements and will somehow ignore your annual reports, where you will still disclose corruption, wasteful expenditure, fruitless expenditure, and so forth. We think if you want to really attract investors and lenders to these institutions, well, then deal with the issues that we're talking about, which is corruption, etc. It doesn't make sense to simply pretend problems don't exist, or to say, we'll put it in this report, but not in the other report. It just sounds like a little bit of gymnastics, which doesn't make sense to us. But I think, Chair, just to Honourable Kais about maintenance, I think for us, it's, yeah, we agree with government. It's the fastest way to end the load shedding. We need to look at investing more. That's why we hope this Eskom debt relief package will free up Eskom's cash flow, money we're spending on the debt to invest in maintenance. But there's also the issue of investing in the right skills, dealing with the issues of corruption, of criminality, of vandalism, and even of sabotage. And again, the law enforcement agencies have to play the role because Eskom doesn't have all of those capacities legally. I think, Chair, also our issue about the Eskom debt relief package, where there's a clause which says, which we think will interfere with collective bargaining. I think that for us, it's unfortunate. We should leave those kind of issues for Eskom management, for the unions at Eskom and the bargaining forum to deal with. And they can, I'm sure they'll be competent to do so. Then, Chair, just to Honourable Tlangwini around municipal debt. So we have proposals in our presentation, I think slide 16. Again, in our Eskom social compact, we had also agreed with government about several interventions. One is to move the country to prepaid. It's not affordable if about 60% of the country is on prepaid. The other 40% is on municipal billing systems, because it means that there's money which is due to Eskom, which is not being paid, the 57 billion rand, etc. And again, Chair, it's not just a question of individual households. We all have seen sometimes the embassies in Gauteng are not paying, hotels, SOEs, government departments are owing Eskom significant money and are not paying on time. That's not sustainable. You can't operate any company, public or private, if customers can pay when they want to or not pay when they want to. The model just is not going to work. So we hear the argument of government about saying, well, then we need to look at what municipal debt is recoverable, which is not recoverable, and that's fine. But that with that which is recoverable, it needs to be legally pursued. You can't simply say to people in Springbok or Tabazimbi, you will pay electricity, but people in other areas, well, we're not too concerned about that. But again, Chair, we do agree we need a new funding model for local government because we agree. So you can move payments to Eskom directly, that's fine. But many municipalities depend upon Eskom electricity tariffs to cross-subsidize other municipal functions. So we can shift from here to there, that's fine. But we need to find a way to also resolve the local government fiscal crisis. Chair, I think also, at the same time, we should find a way to ensure that the poor indigenous households are not left behind. We have the 50 kilowatts, which are meant to be free each month, but many municipalities are no longer providing that. Many poor households no longer receive it. Many are not even aware of how do they go about to make sure they are registered for it and so forth. But you'll find many municipalities require you to register each year, and most communities will have no idea how that is done. And I think it's not by accident, but many municipalities are just simply choosing to cut costs. And it's the poor who are going to be sacrificed in that process by them. But I think, Chair, just to yourself, so I think, how far does the private sector come on board with new generation? It's been quite slow. So we hear, there's 9,000, megawatts on stream in the pipeline, etc. It's fine. I would welcome any generation capacity coming on board, but it's been quite slow. We do hope that the request by Eskom for information, and hopefully soon about battery storage capacity, will help to shift the needle and bring on board new generation capacity. We hope that the efforts by the presidency to address the regulation blockages will bear fruit. But I think, Chair, again, our concern about the debt relief package is that we're blocking Eskom legally from investing in renewable energy itself. So we're saying to Eskom, you can buy renewable energy from the private sector, but we're not going to allow you to own your own renewable energy capacity itself. And that for us it's unfortunate, Chair. We think it needs to be reconsidered, because renewable energy in the longer term will become increasingly the most affordable means of energy generation capacity, in addition to the climate change issues. But if we're not going to allow Eskom to invest in it, we're privatizing in essence renewable energy. And I think lastly, Chair, then I can just end up. Yeah, I think a concern about also, Chair, but not allowing Eskom to invest in new generation capacity is that basically we're through the back door going to increasingly shrink Eskom, open the space completely for the private sector, and that will, we fear, threaten Eskom's survival, as it's going to become increasingly dependent upon aging generation capacity. And that for us is quite worrying, Chair, because Eskom is going to remain the largest player for some time. If we don't allow it to get back on its feet, we're going to constantly have this load shedding crisis. But let me stop there, Chair, and hope I didn't take too long. Thanks, Chairperson.
No, perfect, Kosatu. Mr. Hutchinson from Dear South Africa, please come in and deal with your questions.
Thank you, Chair. I think to address your question first on all opposites aware of the consequences of Eskom demise and others. I'd say yes, definitely, Chairperson.
Okay, continue.
I'd say yes, definitely, Chairperson. It's reflected in the comments. Most comments do have conditions to the issuing of debt relief, and that is reflected quite strongly. You know, the main concern, Chairperson, is not around people are aware of the need for maintenance and for the correction of Eskom. The main concern is around will the money help if corruption and a culture of mismanagement does still exist? Will throwing money at the problem actually provide? You know, we've seen this.
Mr. Hutchinson, you may stop your video where you keep on cutting. Let's see whether we can get a better bandwidth once you have switch off your video and just leave your mic on.
All right, is that better, Chair? I hope so.
That's better. Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Fantastic. We haven't seen enough action from government on dealing with corruption and mismanagement. There simply haven't been enough success stories that have presented themselves enough to give the public confidence in Eskom or government's ability to turn things around. So we definitely need to start with success stories, build up the public's confidence, and then that will see a shift in the public's willingness to agree with future bailouts. We've seen bailouts which really haven't made any difference. What the public essentially want is an immediate solution. The total package of 248 billion in bailouts, the immediate 184 billion. Will that make a difference right now? Will it solve load shedding? It seems to be a major concern about that. And quite honestly, where could this bailout be better spent? Is this the right angle? Is this debt relief going to solve problems? Could it be spent somewhere else where we could see immediate solutions? Where would the public receive the highest return on investment? After all, this is public money we are dealing with. Chair, if I may address a question posed by, or a comment posed by the Honourable Sheikh Iman around privatisation. A lot of the participants are calling for privatisation in various forms, and I always find it quite amusing when it's mentioned that privatisation will lead to a monopoly or monopolistic actions, and also an increase in prices through their drive for seeking profits over service delivery. The complete opposite is true. If we open up the market to privatization, as has been proven many times before, it creates competition in the market, and competition increases efficiency. By increasing efficiency, you increase your profits. You don't increase profits by pushing up your prices. That has the opposite effect most of the time. So competition in the market through many players in the market, which is regulated by the regulator, by NERSA in this instance, and strong legislation which is already in place, then we would ultimately see a reduction in tariffs and a cost saving for electricity users. We've seen this practiced in many other sectors. There was a recent case in the bread production and bread supply industry where there was price collusion. This was taken care of through government legislation and through regulations. So the same would apply in the electricity sector. And then, Chair, to address your general question on privatization of coal-fired power stations, the major problem here is that, in my opinion, privatization of coal-fired power stations will not happen. I don't see private investors investing in coal-fired power stations so long as our national government and presidency has a commitment to move away from coal due to international pressure and loans offered by first world countries. These agreements and commitments need to be redressed. They need to be readdressed, and they need to be made clear to the public, open to the public for assessment, and possibly suspended until South Africa has dealt with the electricity supply generation issues that we have today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hutchinson. Honorable members, quickly, I just want to check if there's anything which came up which you'd like to follow up on, or a question which has just come to your minds. Honorable Matafa.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I am fine so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Sheikh Imam. Honorable Kaiso.
No, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Tlangwini. Anything from your side? Okay, that's fine. Let me quickly, Mr. Mutsa.
Excuse me, Chairperson.
Yes, Honorable Mlenzana.
Just one question. I've been struggling, but I've been listening.
Okay.
Just one question from Mr. Motsi, if I'm pronouncing correctly. Mutsa. Yes, thank you, Chairperson. Does he have this, when he's talking about privatization and private sector, does he have, because Honorable Ntangwini had asked if he has these private enterprises or companies in mind, because he never, or can he, as a person, declare that he is part of such? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mlenzana. Honorable Tobias, I saw your name. Do you want to say something?
No, I was saying I'm still fine, Chair, so far.
Okay, thank you. Let me come in. Mr. Mutso said you didn't hear me. Let me start there. My question was, corruption has been raised as a factor in load shedding by Eskom. You know that private sector has been party to that corruption also. So you know that privatization per se doesn't solve that problem. My question to you is, do you think it is fair for some of your members to have evergreen contracts with Eskom? Do you think that doesn't does contribute to the load shedding and the problems that Eskom has, what should be done with that? I think that's clear. Well, you seem to say the market failure of the early 20s that was meant to be solved by Eskom has been taken care of. Well, let me say I don't agree, because I would say that the fact that we're having many people today who still don't afford to pay Eskom is part of that market failure, so to speak, because most of them were just marginalized and they can't find jobs because of their past. If you want, you may comment on that. Then, yeah, we are saying that to solve the 10% of people of unelectrified places, we need to include that as a condition. We may have to include that as a condition of license. That's what we are saying. So we are saying we must trust private sector to deal with this developmental narrative. Yes. Why? So come back. What has been the performance of private sector and the ones that we are representing in dealing with employment equity to redress the effects of discrimination? Because there are conditions that we put and so on in private sector. What's your experience as far as that is concerned, closer to the sector that you are representing? What has been the performance of your members in the implementation of social labor plans? Abject poverty around mines who make billions of rands. Mr. Mulza, really, we are then saying we should outsource the responsibility of electrification to the private sector. Your comment. My last comment, I'm saying should be careful of not comparing apples with oranges. This reference to the cell phones industry and the electricity, I definitely think that we are comparing two things which are not comparable. Also, you mentioned IDC. How many people in the country are dependent on IDC vis-a-vis those who are dependent on Eskom? I will say to you, if you were to ask, there are many people who, if you were to ask what does IDC do, they wouldn't know. But I don't think, I'll bet my last time that everyone in South Africa, if you ask what does Eskom do, they will know. So I'm just saying that we should be careful of these comparisons that we are making. But make quick comments on what to consider topic questions and where you want to make your observations on my statements. Mr. Mulza, quickly. Mr. Musa, and you may be muted, we don't hear you.
Yes, I'm here, Honorable Chair. I'm just digesting all the points that you've just articulated. On the matter of corruption and the contracts that our members have with Eskom, and some have been involved in corruption. I think basically my submission here is not to say that the private sector, there is no corruption. There is corruption, and in fact, when there's corruption, you need at least two parties. You need the corruptor and the corruptee. I'm in no way saying that the private sector is not corrupt, Honorable Chair. If that's how I came across, I just want to retract that. But what we're saying is that there are state agencies that can handle that, and we are aware that some of the companies that were involved, the amounts are into the billions of rands, and so we think that the state security agencies or the legal processes should take their course and address these matters. And then the issue of the unelectrified, why must we trust the private sector to deal with that? So essentially, the question, Honorable Chair, as I understood it, is that should government then defer addressing that issue of the unelectrified communities or areas to the private sector. Essentially, the point that we're making is that the regulator can play an important role. In as much as in the telecommunications sector, ICASA has played an important role. And here, by making a comparison between the IDC and Eskom, I think I'm basically, it's the principles. It's not necessarily the fact that the two are comparable. They're in two different sectors, and I mean the IDC mainly in the financial aspect, and Eskom in electricity. And Eskom is really key to the economy. If we were to compare, it's much more important than the IDC. But I think the point that I was making was mainly on the principles, not necessarily the fact that the two are comparable. On the issue, Honorable Chair, of discrimination and in the private sector, in the SLPs, I think at the moment I wasn't prepared for this question, but we can have another discussion. I think we can debate to another platform, another forum, but there is really work that we do on the SLPs. And I also acknowledge that there are challenges. There are challenges, serious challenges, but we are working on those challenges with the DMRE. But I wouldn't want to comment much on that. I would like to, out of respect, Honorable Chair. I know I have not comprehensively dealt with this, your questions now, but I think I have clarified to a large extent to what our position is. Thank you very much, Chair, honorable members and colleagues.
No. Thank you, Mr. Musa. I didn't mean to put you in the corner. I was just saying, look, there are things that we have given you guys to do and you haven't done. So I was more or less making my point that we shouldn't sanitize you that much to say that everything we give to you, we are going to be able to deliver. I think that's the point that I was trying to make. But I think your response is it's well taken. Perhaps you might be saying that perhaps we need to engage some other time in future, and you come being better prepared for this thing, because you have responded on the things that on the bill you are here about the Eskom debt relief bill. So obviously you know that you can't compartmentalize things. You end up getting into other things while you are trying to explain other things. So that's, I think your answers are well taken. Don't feel bad about that. Then say, let me start there, just thanking you. I think it helps us to have this other perspective. It also makes us think about certain things that you are raising. Our ears are not closed. When we raise these questions, it's more about clarifying some of the things that are in our heads and so on and so forth, and also try to influence you to look things from our perspectives, since we have got different responsibilities to the society, which are important to both of us. But thank you very much for making yourself available, and also thank dear South Africa, dear Mr. Hutchinson. Thank you very much for also taking time with the research and so on. The issues that you raised are well taken. And if you go to our report, because after all this, we need to go and report to Parliament. You'll see that these things that we pick up from this engagement, or these engagements, are very important. We do report to Parliament about them, so that Parliament in general, we are a subcommittee of Parliament is able to also reflect on the issues raised by the public. So especially from you and from Mr. Motsa, it's your first appearance before us. We really appreciate that. Please do avail yourselves in future as we deal with these issues of national importance. Thank you very much. COSATU, Comrade Matthew, thank you very much for always making yourself available and engaging with us. Raise these issues with us. We think that you are not going to get tired of us. You continue engaging with us and dealing with these issues which are facing our nation. Thank you very much. This takes care of the agenda item that we're busy with. You can remain on the platform. We're a transparent committee. as we deal with our matters. Honorable members, the next agenda item is looking at the minutes of the 20th of April 2023. They were sent to us and we read them. Can I have the mover for the adoption of the minutes?
Move, Mare.
Honorable Mare moves for the adoption. Thank you. Seconder.
Matafa,
Mlenza.
second, Chair.
Honorable Matafa, it's seconding. Thank you. So the minutes of the 20th of April are duly adopted. Let's go to the next item. Darren, do we have an announcement?
Chairperson, yes, just a reminder about Friday's meeting where we will be considering and adopting the report on the Eskom debt relief bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 9 o'clock on Friday, honorable members will be considering the report. My request is that immediately you are finished with the report, Sifiso and Darren, let's look at it and then let's make sure that we circulate it to the honorable members. And I'll request the honorable members to also make their inputs, send them to Darren immediately. We are done with the report. Thank you very much, honorable members. Everybody who's on the platform, our support staff, members of the public, South Africans, for having joined this meeting. The meeting is adjourned.
Long live the chair.
Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you.
Danke, Salo.
Nene.
Yebo.
Siyabonga, Chairperson.
Recording stopped.
Pelile ga meeting.